welcome. Why don't you both stand up first so they know, and then I know you will alternate.
Yeah.
Mitch, you've been here before.
Yes.
And Henrik, you're the first for us. So here's your remote, and the show is yours. And I'll come back and we'll discuss what we've seen in like 20 minutes or so. Thank you. Show is yours.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you. Yes, I will begin, and about halfway through the presentation, Mitch will take over. Northgold is the company we are presenting, and the headline is Central Finland's Premier Gold Explorer. So what does it mean to be an explorer or a junior mining company? They meaning the same thing. What is it that an explorer does? Well, an explorer company is in the business of finding the ore so that a mine or mines can be built. You cannot build a mine without the ore. It needs to be found first, and it doesn't happen by itself. An exploration company is not a typical company. A typical company has both income and expenses. An exploration company has only expenses. It is a given that the junior mining company will go out to the market for funds. That's a fact. It will happen. It's only a question of when and at what terms. Dilution will happen. So if dilution is a given, why would anybody invest in an exploration company? Well, the answer is that the upside can be huge, can be enormous. When an exploration project reaches critical size and goes into development, or when a discovery is made, the market valuation of the junior explorer can go through the roof. The term 10-bagger or even 30-bagger or 50-bagger is commonly heard in this business. That means that the market valuation of the company goes up by a factor of 10 or 30 or 50. There are real-life cases of that. So that was an introduction for what an exploration company does. Here we have a disclaimer. You can find this on our web page. We are making some forward-looking statements. Please read it through carefully. Not spending more time on this here, though. And here, shortly of the company, we are listed here in Stockholm, Nasdaq First North, under the ticker NG. We are a gold exploration and development company advancing resource stage projects in the Middle Ostrobothnia gold belt of central Finland. The company has two fully owned subsidiary companies. In Swedish that would be dotterbolag. Fennia Gold with the COPA project, and Lagerden-Malmi with the Kiimola Trend and Hirsikangas projects. Five reasons to invest in Northgold. Number one, attractive jurisdiction. Finland is a mining-friendly country. Number two, we have a dominant land position in Ostrobothnia with district-scale potential in an underexplored emerging belt. Number three, good infrastructure, roads, electricity, water, everything is near. Number four, our projects have high-value mineralization, meaning they are near to the surface, low strip ratio, and suitable for open-pit mining. And number five, we have very experienced board and management. Here, if you look at the map on the left, you can see geological map of both Finland and Sweden, and the larger map on the right is from this area right here. So the
Henrik, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
We need to have you stand pretty still.
Sorry,
there.
I will.
And don't point in because it gets cut for the people behind the cameras.
My bad. I will stand here.
Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't explain well.
Okay. Anyways, so the map on the left shows a bigger picture, and the map on the right is a smaller part of the Finnish parts on Ostrobothnia. So the geological setting on both sides of the Gulf of Bothnia is the same, and the Finnish side of the Gulf of Bothnia is very much under-drilled, underdeveloped from a geological point of view. The exploration and investment on the Swedish side has been way bigger than on the Finnish side, and subsequently there are a lot more of mines on the Swedish side. The Finnish side has received less than 10% of the exploration investment of the Swedish side. So what that means is that there are huge potential to make discoveries on the Finnish side with further investment and exploration. One could ask, why hasn't there been more exploration on the Finnish side? And the main reason is historical. Exploration companies, foreign exploration companies, were not allowed to operate in Finland until Finland became a member of the European Union. So before that, in theory, a foreign company could get permission, but needed to have permission from the government. So in practice, there were only state-owned companies, Outokumpu and Rautaruukki, doing exploration, and because of lack of competition, exploration was done in a quite small scale, very little drilling, and the little drilling we had was very shallow. On the bigger map, you can see Northgold's flagship COPA gold copper project. It's a north of that is Northgold's Kiimala Trend project. They are separated approximately by 50 kilometers, and west of there is Hirsikangas gold project. And you can also see two past producing mines in the same area. Here we have an asset summary of what Northgold has at the moment, and I'm going to try to speak a bit about these terms and numbers and shortenings, what they mean. Well, it says that COPA gold project has a conditionally approved mining permit compliant resources of approximately 750,000 gold equivalent ounces, and Kiimala Trend gold project has compliant resources of 147,000 gold ounces. Well, what does that mean? Precious metals are measured in troy ounces, and 1 troy ounce is approximately 31.1 grams. 1 ounce of gold is worth very close to 2,000 United States dollars at the moment. What does gold equivalent, AUEQ, gold equivalent mean? Well, in this specific case, it does mean that the value of the copper, which is also present in these resources has been converted to gold. So everything is expressed, how much would it be worth if everything would be gold. And what does the compliant mean? Well, if you take a look at the table, there it says that NY 43101/JORC compliant measured and indicated resources. Well, the NY 43101 is a Canadian standard, and the JORC is a Australian standard. And they are regulatory standards to ensure no foul play. So measured and indicated resources, measured would roughly translate to me being very certain, very certain. Indicated would roughly be quite certain, but definitely less certain than measured. And inferred would be in the lines of there is reason to believe, but definitely more research needs to be done. So the category of measured and indicated is quite certain that is what will be in the ground when a mine is built. And the inferred resource is way more uncertain, but could be proven with more drilling, more research. So in a way of what does this mean in money-wise? You multiply those numbers with the value of the gold. So that much value is in the gold in the ground. Obviously, there is cost to dig it up. Obviously, not 100% can be extracted, but the total amount being 1 million gold equivalent ounces, that would translate roughly to $2 billion. And shortly before I give over to Mitch, 3 points in our strategy and objectives. Number one, grow gold resources and advance them towards development. Number two, make totally new gold discoveries. Number three, continue consolidating the Middle Ostrobothnia gold belt. And I will give over to Mitch right now.
Thank you, Henrik, and thank you, Lars, and good morning, everyone. So we believe gold is the world's most important commodity. It acts as a store of wealth at a time when we're seeing monetary expansion on a scale never seen before. The gold price has risen over the last year to more than $2,000 an ounce as central banks continue to buy large quantities of gold, particularly China. I'd like to remind investors that gold is much bigger than crypto. The value of Bitcoin and Ethereum is less than $1 trillion on market cap, whereas gold mined historically is worth more than 10 trillion. So it's an order of magnitude more significant. I started my career back in 2008, back here, when we were going into recession, and I was working on mine sites over in Canada and experienced the gold price more than double between 2007 and 2011. And we believe the stars are beginning to align for that to happen again with where we're at right now. And I'd like to point out this chart here in the bottom right. It's prepared by Incrementum AG, which I saw at a conference recently in Zurich. But it highlights that the last 3 times that the Fed stopped hiking interest rates, the gold price rose 66%, 189%, and 50% in the years that followed. And of course, the Feds recently halted the interest rates. So that once again, the stars are aligning for another rise in the gold price. We recently announced the 2024 resource update for COPA. It was a significant update. We grew gold equivalent ounces by 37%, at the same time of boosting the grade by 10% by going with a higher cutoff grade. So we added over 200,000 ounces gold equivalent from only 2,000 meters drilled, which results in an outstanding accumulation rate of over 100 ounces for every meter drilled, which far exceeds the overall project accumulation rate of only 33 ounces per meter drilled. As you know, the old timers, the historic drilling had been focused on the sort of the core of the deposit and upgrading the resources to measure and indicate it, whereas Northgold, we're more focused on the growth. So as you can see, we've stepped out these holes over the last couple of years to the south, and we've grown the resource from when we inherited the 300,000 ounces here, and we continue to grow it to the south and towards depth. So the last resource update is 37% more ounces, and we doubled the depth of the deposit. And here's a busy looking plan view for that same cross section you saw on the last slide. Essentially it shows the old resource from last year, and then the blue line, which is the black line, and then this year's update is the blue line. As you can see, significant expansion towards the south, dominated by this one 250 meter step out hole, number 34. So we stepped out 250 meters from the old resource, and we drilled the 400 meter long hole. And we had a significant intercept of 1 gram per ton over 100 meters, gold equivalent that is. And that really helped expand resources and double that depth of the deposit. And what's interesting is these new expanded lateral and depth extents is creating whole new opportunities for resource extension, right? So we had a lot of success here in the central part of the deposit. And so now we want to expand on that and do more drilling around that success to further expand that deepening of the deposit. But also, given the new depth and the new scale of the project, the north is now becoming low-hanging fruit to be pulled into resource. There's lots of historic drilling here to the north. You can see these yellow and red discs on these historic holes. Some of them are drilled in unfavorable orientations and need following up. But these are all gold and copper assays, so you can see there's lots of gold and copper grading over 0.3 grams per ton for the yellow, and then over 1 grams per ton for the red. So with further drilling to the north, we believe that can also be converted into resource. So we have a lot of resource expansion potential, both not only to the south around our recent success, but now also to the north. COPSA is one of Finland's largest undeveloped gold projects. Here's the 4 largest undeveloped projects that we're aware of. The biggest, of course, is Ikkari, held by Rupert Resources. In my opinion, that's the world's top gold development project, and I believe that will be Finland's next gold mine. The next 2, Havieri and Rajapalat. Havieri, it's in a more challenging jurisdiction, given it's located towards southern Finland, near population centers. And then Rajapalat, it's also a challenging jurisdiction as it's up north, partially overlapping with Natura 2000 environmentally protected area. But COPSA is in a less challenging area. It's in a mining jurisdiction in Middle Ostrobothnia, and it's got just a fraction of the drilling of these other projects. So as COPSA continues to be drilled, only 3,000 meters here, these ounces should increase significantly. And I believe that will help COPSA become the next gold mine to be constructed in Finland after Ikkari. Here's our milestones achieved over the last few years. Of course, we listed in 2022. At that time, we had inherited just under 500,000 gold equivalent ounces. We hit the ground running. We drilled 5,000 meters right away, applied for the COPSA Auxiliary Area Mine Permit, and started more geophysics. Last year, we increased resources to 0.8 million ounce gold equivalent, as you can see at the bottom, and did more drilling, and also did some early stage work regionally across the belt. And those results actually are still pending for release. And of course, this year, significant increase to the resource announced last week. We're also expecting a decision on the COPSA Auxiliary Mine Area Permit very soon. And we hope to report lots more exciting results from the early stage base of till drilling and soil sampling we've done across the belt. And we're making plans right now for this year's drill program, which will focus on those resource expansion targets that I pointed out on the map. So here's our gold explorer and developer peers in terms of enterprise value per gold equivalent ounce in the ground resource. As shown, Northgold trades, we continue to trade around that lower quartile range of the combined peer group, whereas our gold explorer peer average is 4 times higher at 20 euros per ounce versus Northgold's 5 euros per ounce. And as Northgold continues to execute its strategy and grow its resources, we think that gap should narrow. And furthermore, the entire peer group right now is valued quite low. When Northgold listed, these average metrics were between 3 and 4 times what they are now. So it's a huge buying opportunity for the sector, but we think especially for Northgold. And here's our strong and lean board and management team. I recently stepped down from CEO as I have some personal commitments and other professional endeavors that require me to be outside of the Nordics. So the board and I agreed it would be best to bring on a new CEO who can be focused more here in the Nordics, and that search is underway now. But I continue to be a supportive shareholder, and I continue to be a big believer in COPA and Northgold's projects across Middle Ostrobothnia, and I continue to be a helpful advisor to the company and its management. We have, since the founding shareholders were Starboard Global, a private equity group, Magnus Minerals, who Henrik is with, and Aurora Exploration, a Finnish geo-consultant. They're the company founders. Since the IPO, we've brought on Finland's only institutional gold fund, Zenito Silver and Gold. They own 5% of the company, and we have corporate ownership by Rupert Resources for 8.3%, following a property transaction and their participation in the financing. And we have incentivized insiders and advisors holding more than 7% of the company. And with that, I'll leave it to Henrik to close things off.
Thank you. Our last slide, I'll be brief. So why invest in Northgold now? I will only say 3 points, not even here. We are very efficiently growing our resources. We are operating in a great area with huge potential for new discoveries. And lastly, by every possible metrics, we are dirt cheap. Thank you.
Hey, that final point, Henrik. Please be here. I'm here. Let's start with you, Henrik, because we had the pleasure of meeting you before here, Mitch, and it's exciting to see the development. And yeah, gold is something else, isn't it? I have a friend who's investing, and he lost faith in everything in 2009. And out of the blue, he went 100% of his assets into. Yeah, believe it.
It's fine.
He went 100% into junior gold mine funds, as I emailed you, Mitch. And it's actually been a decent investment. I think I beat him, but with way more work. And even though he got it not quite right, the world is still here, isn't it? But that's a side story. Henrik, your other job, your day job, one of your other jobs, your main job, is you're with Magnus Minerals in Finland, and Magnus Minerals is the largest shareholder in Northgold. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Magnus Minerals is what is called a prospect generator. We are the only one in Finland, but they are not that uncommon in bigger mining countries such as Canada or Australia. So we do have lots of projects, and as I told you, exploration is a funny business. You just use money. There is no income. The mine along the road is when you get income. from operations. But we have several projects which we find partners to advance, to get the money to do research. One way of doing that is list the companies and get the money from the market. And Northgold is the one of four Magnus has sort of been initiating. We have listed or being part of listing Firefox Gold to Toronto. Firefox Gold is searching for gold in Lapland in Finland. Then there is the first one was, back then it was Finnaust Mining listed in London. Nowadays it's Blue Jay Mining. Then a nickel project in north of Finland called Nordic Nickel was listed in Australia. So this is one form of finding the funds to do meaningful exploration. We do also have classical joint venture project with the company I'm sure you know better, Boliden. We have actually our third and fourth joint venture project ongoing with Boliden, but they are basically contracts between companies. There is no new entity involving in that. But yes, I am the Chief Operating Officer in Magnus Minerals, and that is my day job. And I am the interim CEO, but that is the plan, to be interim, not as the new CEO.
So here before us now, you're like the Glimmer twins, you know. Glimmer twins, that would be Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. But because you had several other projects. Yeah. So this wasn't that dramatic for you when you stepped down as CEO, then you just continue working together. The stock actually took a delayed hit, but then you firmly bounced back on this really upbeat update on the resources.
Being listed is of course you cannot talk what's going to come before it's in the public domain. So this resource update obviously was something that we were working on, but we could not start talking about it before the press release when it's in the public domain, and that happened last week, yes. Or was it?
Last week, yes.
Last week, yes. Yeah.
And somewhere down the road, there will be a feasibility study that will put a net present value on COPA and the other assets.
Yes.
And at that stage, there has to be quite a substantial capex to start operations.
Yeah.
And that's, Mitch, is that where Magnus Minerals come in? They have the network for that without diluting us other guys 98.5%?
The company's focused on resource growth. To pivot into development mode, we would go on to do economic studies, starting with a PEA, and we would hire consultants. The company would hire consultants to do that, but that's the first step. We've started the PEA, but with the recent success, that's sort of on pause right now because significant growth is occurring. And we don't want to put a pin in the project yet. There's still lots of low-hanging fruit in terms of resource growth. And then it would pivot into development mode, starting with a PEA, going on to pre-feasibility and feasibility, like you said, which would increase the certainty of the project economics.
Yes, and then it will start but for a person who is or will become a shareholder in Northgold, at that stage, investors might also invest directly in the mine, or?
Well, if you look at the market valuation of Northgold, it is roughly, I guess, in Swedish crowns, between 50 and 60 million.
Maybe we could pull up this peer asset valuation. There.
Yeah, this is in terms of gold equivalent ounce, of course, and not in terms of market cap. So if you multiply the EV per ounce by the number of ounces, you get the valuation.
Yeah. But we are very, very sort of valued quite low. So this gold or yellow line here shows the mean or average where gold explorers are, and you should notice that this scale is logarithmic. So our value should be 4 times what it is now to be on the average, and I think we can do that. Our exploration results have been great. We just need to get more attention from the market. We need to make more noise.
Yeah. So this here is should be a major reason to buy Northgold shares now that the valuation is quite attractive. If you believe in buying shares low and selling them high.
Absolutely. If you talk about Ikkari deposit in Finland, which is in Lapland, bigger deposit will be a huge mine. Of course, you can buy into Rupert also, but Rupert's market cap is 600 million. We are 4. So, not saying it can be a good investment to invest in Rupert, but it will not go up tenfold anymore. Not likely even doubling. If you're looking for this, obviously there are risks. Nobody can guarantee because every step is behind a permit. Nobody can guarantee that there will be a mine, but there will be a mine in Kopsa. There's a huge potential to make a 10-bagger here.
Question from an investor in the audience.
But let's dwell on this slide. There are very many companies that are below the mean. So a few companies, the average, a few companies raises this average considerably. I mean, it's just we can see it on this slide. So could we really expect a explorer to reach 20 euros an ounce gold equivalent?
Yes, when we listed Northgold March
2022,
so a bit less than 2 years ago, the IPO was at 11.66 crowns and the listing price was on the downside in order for people to get who participate to get positives on investing in Northgold. What happened after the IPO, I really do not know why it went so. Share price started to go up and up and up and up and up and up. And when it reached 40, I was sort of wondering why. 20 I could understand, 30 I could understand. It went all the up to intraday. It was not market close, but it was up to 90 crowns a share. That was odd. I think it was one of those meme stocks things. But anyway, our share price have been already in 90, and we have great results after that. Now we are back at 4 or 5. So if the question is, can we expect that it can go to 20? I would say easily.
But you need some volumes also.
Yes.
There is
we will need short answers.
a size in volumes to be attractive. And what is that?
Well, yeah, we're at 0.75. We just grew COPs at a 0.75 million ounces, 1 million ounce across the belt. So that's a meaningful, inventory of resources. And I do believe these lower valued peers should rise. The ones that are active, right? The ones that are drilling, continuing to advance. If the company's dormant, they may not achieve that mean. But the ones that are active down here in the lower, like Northgold, showing successful results, yes, they should continue to climb that pecking order and approach on that average.
Okay, we need to speed up. Short question, short answer, short question.
Could you say something about your...
Should I have to push this?
Say something about your balance sheet. How long will your money last until you need to take in more money for...
Good question. Public information, quarterly reports, if you take a look at them, you can draw your own conclusions. But roughly speaking, we will need to go to the market this year, yes. But no decisions have been made by the board when, but this year.
There are some big trends in the gold market, and both of them have been negative over a number of years. Like the part of the asset portfolio for gold has gone from 2% to 0.5%. I don't know what type of portfolios, but I think I pulled that from you, Mitch. The other one is central banks are short on cash, so they have been selling gold from 40% down to 15% of their balance sheet. This is impossible for you, but give me a quick roundup. Will this continue or will it bounce back?
Shortly, the physical amount central banks, they have been buying, not selling, but in proportion, you are most likely right.
Not because the balance sheet has exploded.
So am I right?
You're right, though. A small increase in the central bank reserves in terms from like 10% to 20% of their foreign reserves could have a huge impact on the gold price. And China has continually been buying it, and we see that trend continuing, and that should continue to move the gold price. But it should really take off when the fear of missing out kicks in, over about $2,100 per ounce, when all the retail investors should line up.
So this 40% to 15%, I phrased it bad. This is the old days. Gold is this much, balance sheet is this. Gold is still there, but balance sheet is.
Yes,
right.
That is the amount of gold central banks has not gone down. It has gone up, but as a proportion to everything else they have in their balance sheet, it is smaller.
Okay. So, any last words or?
No, thank you, Lars.
Bias.
Thank you, Northgold. Thank you, Henrik. Thank you, Mitch.